I've got a confession to make. I really don't like being a UI UX designer, at least not in a pure design role with no development at all. I should have known better, and the lead developer that I used to work with, who is the architect on the project that I am currently on, he's the one that told me about the job and put in a good word for me as a reference in this new position because he wanted to work with me again. And there would have been a lot of similarities to the role that I worked when I used to work with him as like the UI UX developer, where I did some design, but a lot of my work was implementing the UI. Basically, I would do a little bit of wireframing in a wireframing tool, but then I would immediately go and prototype everything out in code, building out a lot of that front end stuff that I would wireframe. And there was a lot less actual design work. When I applied for the job, he did mention like, hey, like I thought you didn't really like design. And of course I wanted the job, and I thought that there would be more development work, which kind of never happened because timelines changed, and originally I was supposed to start off doing purely design work and then move into a developer role. But since timelines changed, a 5-month MVP turned into a 1-year MVP because of different complications with the team that we had to get the API from, and just a whole lot of other reasons. My role as a pure UI UX designer became a little longer, and I stayed away from programming and writing code longer. And I worked more and more and more in Figma doing design work longer. And I want to say that I hate meetings, but I really like the UI UX design meetings that we would have. I really enjoy the problem solving aspect of implementing a good user experience. That was probably my favorite part of being a UI UX designer, which is what I used to do before when I was a UI UX developer. But in this role, since I was the senior designer, that's what my job was to do, and then take what was discussed in those design sessions, then go and iterate on the Figma design comps. I gotta say that I hate pushing pixels in Figma. It is probably the most boring thing I've ever had to do as far as a job goes. And I'm not trying to shit on designers. I think that it's a really cool job for people who enjoy it. I just now know, after really giving it a serious try for almost a year in this position that I've been in, that it's just not my cup of tea, and it's not what I like to do. And I'm making this video because front-end developers, especially like UI front-end developers, a lot of us feel that maybe design might be a good path, or I should say an alternative path, if we kind of get fed up with doing front-end development work. Design always seems like an option because there's a lot of things that kind of cross over, and you work closely with design when you're a front-end developer. So you feel like it's a job that you could do if you had to do it, or if you wanted to do something different. And that's how I felt that way too, because I had already done some type of design work previously. I just had never been in a pure design role. Remaking the same screen 100 times with slightly different variation. Maybe one of them has a notification on it. Maybe one of them has a button that's focused. Maybe one of them has additional text or a modal. Maybe one of them is just a hair different. And then having to do that again for every screen size that you're going to be developing in, and making this giant file of little pictures on a screen and dragging and dropping and sizing things, and just, God, it's so boring. It's so boring. And I'm saying this because if you feel that you're a developer, or if you feel that you like software development, if you're interested in learning how to code and you've been doing it for a little bit, but you're like, oh, maybe I could do design, it is not going to satisfy you the same way that building out a UI does as a developer. It's not going to tickle the same part of your brain the way you think it is. It's just not. There's not as much crossover, at least in the actual work itself, as you would think there would be. It may seem like there is. It really may seem like there is, but there isn't. And if the position is more of a UI UX developer who does a little bit of design, but then does a lot of coding, and you're thinking about doing that, like, that's fine. Like, I actually kind of enjoyed that because I got the satisfaction of being a part of the meetings and discussing with business and figuring out the problems and talking to users and doing all that part. Like, that's really fun. When you find someone doesn't like the way they have to interact with something, and they don't enjoy the way something behaves on the screen, or just the whole process of having to do something within an application, and you start picking their brain and you start finding out like what it is they actually want, and you start solving those problems. problems, like that's so much fun for me. Like if I could live in that world the whole time, I think I could. It would actually be the only job where I wouldn't mind having meetings all the time if those were the meetings. But the thing is that they're not all those meetings. That's only like a couple hours out of my week I get to do that. And the rest is other meetings like refinements and plannings and all the Scrum sprint stuff and just everything that you would expect in a development job without the fun of building software and just having to design it. I know that some people who watch this, who are designers, who enjoy their jobs, are probably like, whatever, it's not for you. And that's what I'm trying to say, is that if you are on the fence about whether or not design will be good for you, I think that you should spend a good month living in Figma for 6 hours a day. Try to take like a big application and then take all of their components and take all of their pages and then remake them, and then remake those components just a little bit different 1,000 times over. It is enough to drive you crazy. And I think that that's a big reason why my choice to leave and try to pursue something different now was a lot easier for me to make, because I just wasn't enjoying the work recently. And I just don't ever see myself going back as a designer. Holy crap, it's getting dark in here. Had to turn the light on. It was starting to get a little too dark in here. I just want to say, look, like I have a huge respect for people who do design work. I really do. There's a lot of creativity that goes into it that I personally don't have. I think I'm just too much of a developer to be a good designer, but I'm a good developer who can implement good designs and see flaws in user experience. And that was kind of what I brought to the table in this. But when it comes to selecting colors, when it comes to making things pretty, like I prefer to just use a UI library that just makes it easier for me. I don't personally like having to build everything from scratch like that. The longer I am a developer, the less and less I like to mess with CSS, and the less and less I want to have to mess with the UI and work on that aspect of the front end. And the more I want to deal with the problem solving, the more I want to interact with the middleware or the middle layer and the back end and make an application work and figure out how to do all those things, because that's what I've grown to love over the years, being a coder and a programmer. I got to say that I am glad that I did this year, because I now know better what I don't want. If I ever go back to working a regular job again, I will not be doing design work. I really think I'm just going to stay really far away from that. And I legit like missed programming. I didn't realize it because I took this role because I was trying to take a break and I didn't want to really code anymore because I felt like I was burnt out from it. And I felt that this would be a smart move and give me a better idea of what I want. And it did just that. And it made me realize that what I want to do with my skills is to keep being a developer. And what I don't want to do is be a designer from here on out. It's just not something I'm going to do. So I hope this video reaches anyone who might be back and forth between development and design and maybe has already done a little bit of both, or maybe has already done one or the other and isn't sure. I say try it, because everyone's different. Obviously, this is just the way I feel about it. But you might be someone who does a lot of UI development and you might love design work, or you might not. Or you might be a designer who's done a little bit of development work and understands some HTML and CSS and wants to try out being a front-end developer. And you might really like that more. You might find yourself feeling like how I feel, where the design work kind of feels boring after you start actually implementing designs. And it's funny how different it is being on the other end of a Figma file as a designer than it is as a developer. And I've always been in Figma files as a developer, seeing what a designer has made for me to implement. And after a year of being on the designer side of that, I really missed being a developer. And I don't think I'll be doing that again. All right, with all that said, I hope this video was helpful. If you enjoyed it, make sure you hit that like button. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time.